I work for a wildlife magazine. My job is to take photos of animals in their natural habitat. A normal working day for me would be setting up my tent on a mountain trail and waiting for animals to come along. I also use an infrared sensor hooked up to an automatic shutter. I never use popular mountain trails as animals would be too scared to come out if lots of people are around. I've never been frightened on the job, although I am always working alone in the dark and had never had any troubles until now. I arrived at around 1 o'clock to the area I had previously researched online. It was by the bank of a swamp. The usual routine is set up the one-man tent, then take a nap until around 5 p.m. Because I'm always camping deep in the mountains, there's never anyone around. It feels safer than the city in many ways. That afternoon, I hung my radio from a tree branch and got into my tent ready to go for a nap. When I woke up later, it was already dark. I hung my lantern from the tree branch and started getting my camera equipment ready. I put my headlamp on and prepared to shoot some photos. I remember being usually tense and full of anticipation. I headed out of the tent, and that's when I noticed something strange. Upstream from the swamp, about 10 meters away, I noticed a tent. It was a blue tent. It was weird. This wasn't a fishing area. It was a totally uninhabited area. I didn't think it was a mountain climber. I couldn't imagine anyone else being here but me. And I could see no light coming from the tent. Perhaps someone was asleep in there. Nevertheless, that tent wasn't there when I was setting up mine. Did someone come along silently while I was sleeping? That's kind of weird. Anyway, I pushed on and started looking for a good place to take photos. At that moment, a light went on in the blue tent, which made the tent change color. It went a darker color. Maybe I should go and say a courteous hello, I thought. But I decided against that, as the tent freaked me out a bit. That's really an excuse though. I just didn't want to go anywhere near it. I was scared of it, and probably whoever was inside of it. I wanted to move to another spot. It would be a pain, but I didn't think I would be able to concentrate with that tent on my mind. I set about dismantling my tent as quietly as possible while trying to remain out of sight of that tent, and began trekking deeper into the mountain woods. I must have walked over 1 kilometer alongside the river up the mountain and came to set up camp at the top of a steep hill. By the time I put my tent up again, it was unfortunately too late to do any photography. It was past 9 o'clock, so I decided to have some dinner, and after eating, thought I would just get much sleep, as there wasn't much else to do. It should have been chilly since it was the middle of May, but I woke up in the middle of the night sweating in my sleeping bag. A quick glance at my watch told me it was just after 2 a.m. The air in the tent was warm and stale, so I pulled down the zipper to let some fresh, cool night air in. And I gasped. The blue tent was right in front of mine. The strange lights came on in the tent again. 2 hands pressed against the dirty fabric of the blue tent. The person in the tent was reaching towards me in the darkness. For a moment I felt so distant and so stunned, but I quickly came to my senses and grabbed my torch and pointed it at the blue tent. Whatever was in that tent was groping around to grab the zip and get out. It must have heard me and saw my torchlight. I ran for it and didn't look back. I fell in the swamp, and I ran with my lower body soaking wet. It didn't stop me though. It was pitch black as I ran, and I tripped and stumbled countless times, but I was determined to get away from that tent and its denizen. I ended up losing my torch along the way too. When I physically couldn't run anymore, I crouched by a tree and shivered in fear and waited until daybreak. The next day I walked back to the place where my tent was, and that other tent. I called out to let my presence be known. I was done with being scared. I shouted out again, but there was no response. Both tents were still there. The blue tent, though, looked a bit more worn and haggard. I looked inside my tent. It seems as if the person or people in the blue tent had left me a parting gift. A pile of bones. Human bones, animal bones, I have no idea. And I don't do solo trips in the mountains or woods anymore.